Welcome to the Legal Growth Table. I'm Andrew Hutchinson.
And I am Barbara Koenen-Geering.
And together, we are your hosts. Every 2 weeks, we sit down with the people who are actually doing the work of growing law firms from the inside. The ones who know where the real conversations happen, and more importantly, where they don't.
Because everyone in this industry talks about growth. Very few talk honestly about how it actually happens. The politics, the resistance, the things that didn't go to plan. That's what this table is for. So let's get into it. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Legal Growth Table podcast with my co-host Andrew and our very special guest today, Chris Newman, who is the Chief Marketing and Business Development Officer at Mintz. Chris, I'm so pleased that you came on today because we're going to discuss a very, very exciting topic, which is the future of business development and marketing teams in law firms. You've got a great background, and I wouldn't do justice if I was going to introduce your entire career. So maybe you could jump in and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Barbara, and thank you to you and Andrew for having me. My entire career has been AM law firms predominantly. I've spent time in different functions, but mostly focused on business development at firms like Cravath, Cooley, McDermott, and now Mintz. Each of those have given me a very different perspective, a clear lens into really how to make impact at different levels at all those organizations. And where my journey really has taken me in the last decade or so is being at the forefront of innovation, tied to marketing and business development. So after spending almost 9 years at McDermott Will, where I was in charge of a number of different functions, the last batch was our sales enablement team, which is typically not a function that you hear, being at a law firm. Mm-hmm. But had a lot of responsibility overseeing our core BD strategies and really how it intersected with our go-to-market plays for our various practices. Last year, I made the first-time leap to a chief role, joining Mintz, which is a AmLaw 78 firm that really has been on a tremendous upward trajectory and really is at that point where it was looking to take that next leap into being more of a, more of a strategic operation for our department. So moving from more away from that service model to be really go-to advisors and shaping up a department that not only will sustain the firm's growth in present day, but really looking more holistically out to the future, which, as a lot of technology has emerged and a lot of new skills are needed. And there's more opportunity to recenter what the marketing and BD team can do for a firm. It really has presented the opportunity to be creative and thoughtful with reimagining what this department can be and really how that can tremendously impact the bottom line and really drive the growth intentions around a firm and, help drive that, that to really the fruition that most firms are seeking out.
I love all of that. This sounds exactly like where we want to head, obviously, and we know that not all firms are quite there yet. So I think today we obviously want to pick your brain a little on what that then really means and in sort of like more practical terms, where do you see things are going with regards to the future of the BD and marketing profession, which I think is going to change drastically given, the use of AI and other tech tools that are coming through. I also know that Andrew is very, very excited to talk about a particular topic that you've just addressed. And I would love to unpick this with both of you, which is sales enablement, as you said it so nicely. We talk about this a lot, and we talk about sort of like a sales engineering type of role. I think one of the most important parts of law firm marketing and business development in terms of the role that they play is connecting the dots. That's what we hear all the time from partners, at least, that this is what they value a lot from those team members as well. So sales enablement, tell me more. And Andrew, you've worked across different sales organizations. Are there things we should learn from what you've learned there? But first, Chris, what is sales enablement? Enlighten us.
Yeah, I mean, sales enablement to me, the core functions really were aligned to commercial excellence. So becoming much more of a commercial mindset and really driving that behavior through, proper curriculum, proper coaching, proper discipline around pipeline management, drastic components that really drive intentional growth. Business intelligence. So really evolving what business intelligence is in a law firm. So it's not just doing, company profiles or industry profiles, but it's really cross-pollinating large sets of data and using, evolving analytical tools to really create that customized experience of understanding things like ideal client profile, advancing white space analysis to be much more scoring based, factoring in things like lead generation. A targeting team was part of that as well. So a unit within the BD, ecosystem that was really driving outreach to new logos, trying to really disrupt, how we looked at events and getting attendance to events with both, current clients or current prospects as well as, new ones that we haven't necessarily targeted. Having alignment to our tech team, so enabling CRM, experience management, again, analytical tools like Power BI that really can help synthesize the information. We were doing a lot in the client feedback, context, as well as really evolving the client experience. I think client experience is probably one of the underappreciated areas within a law firm. And I think what you're seeing right now is a significant disruption where the firms with the deeper pockets are putting a lot more investment around client experience. And so one of the last things I did at McDermott was start our digital products function in conjunction with our IT department. That was really conceptualizing subscription-based products, having a proprietary tool that was creating collaboration amongst the clients and the lawyers. Thinking through what redefining value looks like in terms of, really insulating those relationships with things that go beyond just legal service delivery. And then just being a lot more intentional around business planning. So, one of the cool things at McDermott was they had roughly about 97% of our partners participate in business plan, tied to forecasting. And that really fed our targeting ecosystem to really align to ensuring that the right prospects and clients were being properly engaged with. That also bled into, having more direct scoring systems, tied to that. So very, evolutionary approach to business development. And I think that was something that really, as you see the gap in the American lawyer distinctions, the firms that are putting more and more resource behind that are really starting to create some separation.
Sounds like music to your ears, Andrew.
Well, you said so many things in there, and the one that many things popped out to me, but you said pipeline, which is funny to me because I remember going to my first LMA event in 2015 in Boston, and I remember standing in a session where Chris Fritsch was talking about the fact that you should just start writing your pipeline down. And I remember standing there, and I'd only been I've sold to legal for a long time, right? But I'd never been in the sort of marketing and BD space. And, to Barbara's point, I've worked across many different sales organizations. And of course, pipeline sits at the very heart of that. And I remember standing there going, well, Pete, law firms don't have a pipeline? What do you mean? Like, how do you exist? And I remember walking into a meeting not that many weeks later, and I said to the CMO, so how often do you share the pipeline with the CFO? Firstly, what pipeline? And secondly, why would the CFO care? And I'm like, because isn't that how you build a business, right? Mm-hmm. And so the fact that, the pipeline is sort of front and center and then tied to business plans. I mean, you guys were at a very high bar. I guess the question for you is, having had that experience, which I think is phenomenal, right? And I've had some dealings with McDermott, so I know some of the things that you put in place firsthand. How do you build that? How do you come into a new firm, and where do you start? Because you listed off
Yep,
Some
yep.
very mature things,
Yeah,
right?
but also the team members, right? Because I would sort of like I have in my head what a really forward-looking team structure should look like, which, in my view, and maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, it should no longer be a BDM marketing specialist. I mean, what is that even?
Mhm.
But who are we looking for? With regards to what you've just unpacked and what you said is important. So I think that's sort of like two questions in one. We want
Yeah,
to know.
yeah. So to start with Andrew's question, I mean, I think like most leaps, you have to understand where your organization is before you go in and try to overpower culture with the things that you bring from your last organization. So, I went in with an understanding. I think the interview process for any individual going into a chief role becomes a real critical access point to understand what you're walking into. One of the things I've always done in my career is actually turn down one or two, leap opportunities until I find the right one for me. And when I talked to Mintz, I could see the innovation, the desire to want to get better. But it was also clear to me that, we were building from an organization where our voice wasn't as influential as we needed, right? And so for me, as I looked at the journey of where we want to be within, the first year, first of all, was how do we create an identity for ourselves? So for me, it's Mintz Mobilizer, which I've been out there with, which really is our team charter. And that really is the framework that we start every department call with. It's a mindset, it's tied to growth mindset, it's being open to new ideas, driving curiosity, creating influence. So when I came into the team, we did a lot of how do we create influence, because if we don't have influence, we're not going to be able to make these changes the way that we need to, right? And so we've been, what I have been doing in terms of our staging, and we just got through what I consider phase one, and we're moving into now past foundation, and actually moving into the strategy, the pipeline build outs, which is a big thing right now for us. Um, what I would say is you have to be smart and calculated. You use that previous experience to demonstrate confidence and knowledge and baseline understanding of how we're going to get there and the why. But you have to be able to create the right conversations with the right individuals to make sure that they trust you and are going to support you in that execution. So really, what I've been concentrating on for 6 months plus is creating that trust and that support in that buy-in. I'm very blessed to have an executive committee as well as a policy committee that is fully behind the vision. And that really has been, focused on five core things that I've been presenting as my core, strategic focus, which is, strategic BD hires, which we'll talk about because Barbara, that's what you were indicating, communication, data, technology, the training and curriculum. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
when we look at that, it became okay. This is the model that we're building towards, and then you have those subcomponents to it. So sales enablement to me, if I'm chipping away at it, I start saying, okay, client feedback's first, because the more we can leverage the voice of the client, the more we can activate other solutions that need to be put into play. Business intelligence is we've had some great success with it. And now we're building on it as we build out our data infrastructure. So we're finally together stitching the full firmographic data set in a way where we can start to operationalize it. We're for the first time ever rolling out a new CRM system that will be tied to pipeline management and really creating the culture around that. But we're also recognizing that if we're going to create a sales oriented culture, we do have to teach the basics around how to build a pipeline, how to create a forecasting plan. And right now, literally the conversations I'm in the midst this week. So this is how relevant it is to what we're doing. But for me, one of the things that people have said to me since coming here is that the depth of knowledge on the science behind the why has gone so far in helping get the buy-in that we need to get to create the culture of the future. And for me, it's creating excitement through a vision that ultimately I can go out and hire the best talent that wants to be part of a vision, right?
yeah,
So as we think about a new chief coming into a role, one of the first hires I made was a director of operations and transformation. Really a number two, someone that could really drive home the outcomes I needed as I was buying that influence, as I was gaining that footing to be able to actually, showcase what we're moving towards. Um, by having an individual like that, uh, you can operationalize your ideas and your concepts a lot quicker while also driving the outcomes with the partner buy-in and things that tie into that. I think making sure you're disrupting the models to have more senior level individuals, right? So Barbara, to your observation earlier, it's either been a generalist model or it's often been a model of hire people as quickly as you can rather than the best people that are going to drive your
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
So we've put a lot of deliberate focus on making sure we're hiring the right people. And if it costs us time by extending a search by a few months, that's not a problem to us because we're ready for the long term play here. So we've been adding more senior level folks on the practice side. We have also made sure that we've got people not that are in a whack-a-mole mode, which is giving them more opportunity to specialize in their practice areas so that they can drive the knowledge so that the partners feel like they have um, not only thought partners and people that are level setting their knowledge base, but also people that can push their knowledge base above where they currently stand, right? So really, challenging the thinking in a way where it gets them more and more curious about what we could be doing that they're not currently doing. That plays into sales enablement in a way where I see it as building up incrementally to that platform, but I also recognize that it's going to be, a 2-year play to eventually have those types of resources that you ultimately need to drive those more proactive functions.
Yeah, and would you say the background of these people, are they from within the industry? As in, I'm not talking about the legal industry, but potentially the industries where your firm has its focus, or what is sort of like important for you in terms of background
Yeah, it's a
skills?
great. So I've had a lot of mixed experiences with experimenting with individuals outside the industry as well as even within the industry. To be honest with you, but in terms of we are bringing in a lot of folks from outside the industry, predominantly on our marketing team. So we've brought in some senior level folks that have been in professional services, but not not linked to the legal industry. On the
Yeah.
BD side, we're not at a point where we've got a big team of external facing sales professionals. And usually, in my experience, those are the folks that tend to come in from other industries.
Yeah.
We are dipping our toe in the water, with it, and we've got an individual that's been with our team for 20 years that really has that pulse. But I'm not a strong believer that you can't make the current talent in the legal industry work the way it needs to, as long as you've got the right buy-in to lean into the teachings and in the way that we're doing it at Mintz.
So any data scientists and AI engineers, coders coming into your team soon?
Uh, in terms of direct title, no, but we are using our transformation team to really start piloting a lot of this stuff. I mean, we're really testing out, building out our own agentic AI. I think what we're not trying to get sucked into is all the competing products that are out there right now. I think there's a lot of noise, and there's got to be a lot of settle down moments of like who's actually going to accelerate. I think there's a lot of false promises too. So what I'm leaning more and more on is homegrown ecosystems, and we've brought in some really great talent on the technology side. So we're matching that up with the transformation in the operations team to really marry up what we can and cannot do. I remember last year I was at a retreat for Mintz when we were doing our first team to get together, and I asked the team who had used AI in the room, and I think it was less than 20%. Right now, if we asked this question, we'd be up over 80%. And I think we're getting even more and more dynamic with it. We're putting it really into the team culture. But we haven't gone down the path yet of having specific data scientists or AI engineers. That said, we're doing it in a scrappy way while building up to getting the more critical opportunity to actually have defined roles like that.
Well, I think that makes sense, right? You talk about the settling. I think there's definitely a settling that needs to happen, just on everything related to AI, because there's so much. Everyone talks about the hype, and yes, there's hype, but there's also a lot of conversation, right? And you've got firms who are building stuff, you've got vendors who are trying to build stuff, and there isn't, particularly on the business of law and very specifically in marketing and BD, I think people are still trying to find, well, where does it actually fit best? There's some obvious places. How do I use it to do a first draft of something, right? That's a natural, obvious place for it to sit. But how do we move beyond that? And I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we were talking about a company that had done some very traditional kind of AI-centric data analytics on your clients and trying to help you identify where your next opportunity is coming from. And they've just reimagined themselves with what AI can do today, right? So they've gone from legacy AI into large language models. And that's something that is only becoming realistic as the models continue to get better and better, because we know that, early stage models were challenged with data analytics and those sorts of things. And so I think your point about do stuff, be scrappy with stuff, because I think it's going to take a while for people to really figure out what the real opportunity is here.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Andrew, and I think that really is moving into the predictive stratosphere versus how do you create better operational outputs. It's to me, I think of AI as a thought partner that I have in my back pocket for pretty much everything I do, and so a lot of what I do is teaching the system, so I have resource that I can pull back into as I am brainstorming a new idea or coming up with a new hypothesis or. What I've been really moving into and what we've been pushing the team on is really cross-pollinating different AI tools so that you're not caught up in one system, right? You're actually saying, okay, I'm going to problem solve this over here. I've got another thread over here that's tackling this issue, but like this actually is you're thinking about the broader strategy of a firm or even just contextually trying to reimagine the image of a department. There are so many times that there's bleed over effects, right? And so one of the things you got to be careful with is getting too caught up in an AI thread where you've almost lost thought. You lost a train of thought of like what you actually were originally trying to go for. And where I've seen a lot of success with my senior team is really using the problem solving components of AI to then integrate into larger playbooks, work products, strategy plans, things that drive memo, creation, things of that nature. That's where the power is right now. And, again, one of the things that we are driving in our department is discipline, curiosity, because if you're curious, AI becomes a endless tool of success, but you really have to put the energy into what am I framing when I'm teaching it? How is it going to learn for future instances and then build that knowledge base up and also pause when you need to refine the model for what you're working within to really ensure that it's capturing your knowledge and your perspective and not just putting out, what is it, work slop as they call it in terms of the AI, outputs. There was an interesting article even this week or a couple of weeks ago in HBR that talked about how while AI is definitely creating a lot more productivity with more deliverables, it actually is diluting people's specialization and their intention on how they're focusing on their projects because they're trying to almost do too much volume versus concentrating on the outcomes that are in front of them at that point.
Well, and I see that on the technology side, right? People are now saying, well, I can build anything and I can build it quickly. Well, you can, but how much depth do you have in the things that you're building, right? Because and we've seen this in marketing and BD technology in law firms for decades. Like, are we actually solving the problems? And I was talking to someone last night, and I was joking with them about a particular platform, and I remember saying, "So how do you create name badges?" And the product person was like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you realize that anyone who's running events in law firms, one of their biggest challenges and takes the most time is printing the name badges and trying to get them to understand the challenges that are faced, right, by the community, and how do you go deep on those things, and how do you make it easier and better? And I think you're right. People get lost in AI in a whole variety of things, and technology is a great example. It's like, well, I can do everything. Yes, you can, but are you delivering the quality of technology that people need, right?
Yeah.
And I think the same is true in the roles that you have in your team, right?
Well, and I think, one of the mandates I had coming in was really to create operational infrastructure. We were what I would call a unit that every team member did it their own way, and somehow it
Mm.
all came together, but not in a meaningful way that we need to be operating as. And so we've really, just using it as one core basic function, but really something that has the application to drive significant evolution is playbooks, right? So if I have a
Mm.
framework on how to develop successful playbooks that really is going to reimagine how you do events, reimagine how you do pitches, reimagine how you do a campaign or competitive intelligence, whatever it might be, it has not only efficiency benefits, it not only has capturing the moment so you can train more easily to it as new individuals come on, but it also allows our team to again be much more influential with how they engage the lawyers. Because what I'm finding at Mintz, and I found it at McDermott as well as Cooley and really even Cravath, to be honest with you, is if you can provide a knowledge base that's at the lawyer or above it, they're going to respect you instantly, and they're going to
Yeah, the
want more of
credibility
that.
grows.
It
Yeah.
just creates a new wave of credibility in a way where, if you are trying to experiment or you're trying to innovate or you're trying to get them outside their comfort zone, you're going to really have the support because you've already proven that you are, quite knowledgeable. You've got the right baseline information, but you're also going above what they have access to for information. And to me, that's a huge credibility. It really it's really a springboard for credibility in so many ways.
Yeah, it's what I wanted to ask you actually is when we speak about, sales enablement and those roles around data analytics, and we also see, I mean, we all know the three of us are not so fussed about titles, but we do see, big titles coming up like chief growth officers and but when we then, and obviously your team, you've I think you've named them mobilizers, which I really really like because that's essentially what they are doing, and I think that's really sort of like spot on and helps people understand. Okay, what is it that you're there to do? But at the same time, I wanted to ask you, how do lawyers get on with all of this? Because you mentioned playbooks and all of this jargon is
Yeah,
very new
yeah,
to
of
them,
course.
especially in a very traditional setting. I mean, law firms are still very traditional in their ways, in their setup, in their structure, and their culture. So how do you get lawyers to get on the bandwagon with you, with all of this new fancy lingo and AI talk and new
Yeah.
rules coming through, and they wouldn't know what a data analyst supposedly should be doing in your team, or a sales engineer, or whoever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Barbara, and I definitely have experienced that in the last 10 months. To me, it's not overwhelming the audience with all the details. It's really staying, what's the benefit to them and how is it going to reshape things. Like most law firms, growth happens in really two ways, rate increases or market share, right? And obviously the legal industry over the last few years has gone gangbusters over market share growth through lateral acquisitions, which, has seemingly been always the trend. But to me, when you start at the core principle of we're all about trying to figure out how we're going to take market share and grow with intention around that, but then you present the complexity of the buying environment, right? So I think
Yeah.
if you look at the short list by David Ackert, it's something where 13 to 15 touch points are needed for every new client engagement, right? Or BTI's research a few weeks ago said 1 out of 13 pitches actually is a success, right? Just those simple points, right, creates a narrative of the competition is harder to get work. There's a lot more discipline needed. There's a lot more, intention around how we do things. So, while you're looking at things like just doing a pitch or you're looking at just doing an event, it really is a complex wheel of, 10 or 12 different things that you have to be doing to create that engagement. For me, when you start off with that as the end game, and then you work into how all the changes and all the evolution of the team is going to create more activation on those engagement points, which will lead to hopefully more, real life opportunities to get new work, and then working on that, how to actually close and then deliver on value and create that, that loyalty or institutionalization of clients. You're going to get a lot more, interest in leaning into it. They're not going to know how to do it or what you're necessarily articulating in that moment, but that's where the trust has started to build up to be where they're curious themselves and they want to be part of something that's different because, you're really coming at them with not only this is where the world that we live in, but also using data and information to support the story. Which, as we know, lawyers, they value evidence to really
Yeah.
understand the why.
Yeah. Stay factual.
Yep.
There are so many questions here, and I know that Barbara's going to be watching the clock, and we're pretty close to time. But one of the things that occurs to me as I listen to you talking about this stuff, the overarching message is how you sell, dirty word, but how you sell to your clients going forwards is going to become increasingly more sophisticated. Um, and I think my question to you would be, at what point do you think the lawyers will start transitioning out of being the leader of that process and being a supporting actor in how business is generated?
I think it's always gonna there's gonna be what I would say a marriage between two parties that have vested interest to do it together. There's never going to be a
Yeah,
hierarchical element where lawyers are going to say, okay, I fully hand this off. I think what you'll see is
sure.
that there will be a lot more trust and understanding on how to get over those buying hurdles that they
Mm,
typically would not have thought of because they really have not thought of that buying journey, right? We had this slide at McDermott that was from Gartner that really talked through the legal buying journey and the complexities of it. And one of the things that we did was we overlaid circles on top of all the different touch points that reflected a marketing output. And it was something like 16 or 17 different, components in that representative example. And I think when you start to elevate your talent, you start to elevate your influence, you start to elevate your knowledge, you can go into a lawyer and say, look, you are stuck in the consideration phase. You don't know how to get past it. We got to do something different. That's again language that the lawyers are not going to necessarily be 100% comfortable with. But if you have the proven, impacts, they're going to be much more apt to listen and think through, let me take that advice into consideration and see how we can, obviously move the needle in the right direction. That's where a lot of that more commercial excellence, that coaching comes in, to really help the lawyers think through, you know, going back to your point earlier, Andrew, about pipelines, right? Pipelines are there, but it's all about the journey of the pipeline, right?
mm,
It's all about understanding
100%.
where is everyone in the stage of
Yeah.
the right conversations, and most of the time they're not close to the closing the deal, right? And so
Mm,
culturally, I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity to get the lawyers to not necessarily give it up, but to say, okay, I trust this advice, I'm going to act on it, and then come back proudly and say, wow, it worked. Because
mm,
that's the greatest feeling when you're and I think the other thing too, and we haven't talked about this, I do think you're seeing more and more evolution of senior BD professionals engaging directly with clients. Legal operations has created a huge opportunity for folks at the director level and above, right, to really start to mature the client relationships on the bigger companies where they have those functions. That also gives you access to knowledge that the partners may not have. So once you start getting embedded in the fabric of the actual client relationships, the sort of the hierarchical element of lawyer versus professional staff or professional business professional, I think starts to erode quicker, and that really is something I did see at McDermott quite a bit, which is just an equal playing field, at least on that that client pursuit.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because we do see this now across more and more firms where this is becoming a little bit more normal. It's still not the norm, right?
Correct.
Account management is a principle now. Key client programs, etc. They're all existent, but account management is essentially also managing an account properly, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the lawyer. Whereas I think naturally the understanding would be, oh, but this is the key client program is for the lawyers, and the business development team is sort of like supporting in those relationships. But now we slowly see a shift where business development are actually taking ownership of some of these relationships, and the results and impacts of that. And I mean, to your point earlier, I think everything here is around showing value, right? Value and impact. And I think as long as you can show that, and you can show, everyone can see it's a team effort. It's not just a one individual show. And that's really important, I think, to mention. It needs to be like a proper sort of like full circle engagement across the wider firm where the client journey is properly mapped out, who comes in when, and we can see this work. So it doesn't have to be the lawyer is the salesperson per se. It could be a team of people, including business development professionals, who it's their profession. They know,
Correct.
they're
Yep.
experts.
Yes.
So it only
Well,
makes
and I think
logical
that's where the influence component comes in. I mean, I'll give you a quick example because I know we're almost at time, but like we had a very, we have a key account program at Mintz, and then the same thing at McDermott, where, Barbara, to your point, it was almost, operating in some ways, directly accessing clients, but mostly operating more as a support structure for the lawyers to manage the account. And I remember at some point late last year, we had a big meeting where we were going into one of our key accounts, and our new lead of that team said, "Hey, I think I can add a lot of value to this big meeting. Can I participate?" And the partner, took the feedback. He said, "Sure." And it was interesting. I caught up with that partner a week or two later, and he said, "I never thought to have that person in the room during the client conversation, and it really made sense to me once they were there. I started to actually think like, oh wait, I should do this more often." And so I think again is why I started off with the influence conversation, leading into now we can make the impact because we know how to properly engage and provide the benefits in a way where the lawyers say, you know what, I've got nothing to lose. Let's try it. And most of the time you're going to come back with a success story that leads to the next opportunity, that leads to the next opportunity, and that any individual that's trying to reimagine a marketing and BD department in this era is really by design trying to create broader strokes of impact, and it takes those wins to continue to build off of and really leverage how you actually push the needle on and getting the lawyers outside their comfort zones.
We're on a mission. Sounds
We are.
good. Yeah, and it's a good development, right? Because it makes the roles itself a lot more interesting as well. So the ability to attract real good talent, to your earlier point, I think is sort of like we're ready for it. It's there. We're in this moment of time where we see this shift, and I think it's really, really important for just generally for the legal profession overall. This will be a game changer. Thank you, Chris. This was really, really interesting. Very valuable insights that you've shared. We really do appreciate your transparency as well. Andrew, always a pleasure to co-host
Always a
this with
pleasure.
you. Thank you so much. And I know that we could speak for hours, so we would love to have
Until
you
next
back.
time.
Exactly. I'm sure there is a lot more that we can unpack. But for now, we want to say thank you, Chris. We really do appreciate you. And we'll see you another time.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, guys.
If this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone in your firm who needs to hear it.
You can find us on Spotify and YouTube, and follow along on LinkedIn, where we keep the conversation going between episodes.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.